Welcome to 5 at 5 with Stonewall Offices. I'm attorney Brendan Bybee with 5 minutes on the estate tax. And do I need to be concerned about the estate tax? So you may be asking yourself, or you may ask an attorney friend, you may look at your bank statements and your investments and wonder, do I need to be worried about the estate tax? I've got a new administration in the White House. We have a change in control in Congress. Taxes are on the table. And many people are concerned about whether or not that change is going to affect them. In the first place, I want to say, obviously, the question, do I need to be worried about the estate tax, can many times the only real answer you can give is maybe. I don't know. Unless you have a very modest estate, it's really hard to know whether or not you will really have a concern over that. But I want to share something with you quickly. And that's this. So this is the current estate tax exemption. The Trump administration essentially doubled the exemption in 2018, so that we had this huge jump that you can see on the chart there. But you can also see that that was going to sunset. That was only going to last until 2025 anyway, after which it was going to go back down to the prior exemption, which is tied to inflation. So you can see that big jump there. When you clear out that much property there that would be subject to an estate tax, you shrink down the number of people that really have to worry about that. Of course, when you look at the time period here, that means the only people who don't have to worry about it are people who are going to die within that period of time. They're clearly covered by it, right? But you can see that it changes. And if we look at all of that time period, for the most part, whether it was sort of flat and stayed the same for a long period of time, or whether, as it has in more recent times, been increased in terms of the amount of the exemption for people that could escape the estate tax under that amount, we see change. And it's always something that we have to deal with when we're dealing with the law and when we're dealing with taxes. So here's kind of what we're looking at. A couple of different projections of what might happen. We know now that the estate tax is on the table. There's a tax bill that's been introduced. It's not yet being negotiated. We're not seeing where that's going yet. There's a lot of priorities for the current administration, but tax is one of the next things to come up. And as far as we know, as far as we've been told anyway, the expectation is that these changes are not going to go in effect this year, but we should expect them to be voted on sometime this year and go into effect for 2022. So with that, we're looking at a few different options on what happens in the near term with the estate tax. It could go back to the amount it was before the Trump essentially doubling the exemption. We have the Biden campaign proposal, which was $3.5 million, and we have the Sanders proposal of taking it down to $1 million. Well, Sanders has introduced a bill. That bill seeks to peg that exemption amount to $3.5 million. It seeks to change the exemption amount for gifting, lifetime gift exemption amount, to $1 million, and that's a big change. So that's certainly, at least if it passes as it's proposed, it looks like this. You see that big jump where we've cut out a number of people who now don't have to worry about it. But now we're looking at 2022, that concern coming in for a greater number of people than there were before 2018, perhaps, that now have an estate tax concern. So, do you have to be concerned about the estate tax? Can you rely on the exemption going up and being large? Are you going to maybe see this come down? And if you look at the Sanders proposal here, what if that comes up sometime in the future? Biden's not a fan of that. Maybe what if they reduce it and then a few more years, different administration, it gets reduced again? Well, that's the thing. It changes all the time. It was stable for a long time, but it's been somewhat of a political football, and has seen some significant change over the last decade. So if you look at that, nobody can look at that and say you don't have to worry about it, or unless you have a lot of assets, you're certainly going to have to worry about it. In almost all cases, maybe a little bit more certainty there. but it could change, and that's the thing. We can make some moves right now that can affect that. Because we're dealing with laws that are subject to change, it can be difficult to plan, and that's why we like to do flexible planning and consider, do you have an estate tax problem right now? Maybe, maybe not. Are you going to have an estate tax problem in the future? Maybe, maybe not. But we want to look at what are the scenarios that are going to affect you? Is it an issue of if I don't deal with the estate tax, we're going to have a tax inefficient passage of property, and my kids are going to have less of an inheritance than if I had thought about this ahead of time. Maybe so. But it can also be a concern over, if I don't really have an estate tax concern, do I really need my trust dividing this into two pieces? Do I want separate trusts when the first spouse dies? Maybe, maybe not. That can be cumbersome for many. It can pose some issues. And if you go from a small estate tax exemption where we're definitely going to have an estate tax if the law stays the same, so we want to have this kind of planning. When that can change when the next law comes, then that's why we want to look at flexible planning. It's not necessarily what you want, depends on all of your needs, not just the tax planning needs, but for those tax planning needs, because taxes can change, because these things, we look at a large exemption and we want to think, oh, that's going to last forever, I'm going to be covered. It may not. It may not last forever. You may not be covered. And it's good to have some flexibility to know exactly how we can adapt to those things within all of the other constraints and concerns that you have, to say, okay, this plan can adapt. We can avoid tax if there's an opportunity there, or we can do other things to provide other benefits there. And that's more of what we do these days, as opposed to the rigid planning that was put in place a long time ago, when most people, anybody except for those with the most modest estates, had at least some concern over estate taxes. So it's always something that we keep an eye on. We're always looking to see, what the changes are going to look like and how they might affect our clients. And certainly, if there are changes, we want to let you know, and we want you to come and talk to us so we can help you figure out how your plan is set right now to adapt to those changes, and if that still fits for you. So if you need help with that, if you have a concern over whether your plan is flexible enough to avoid taxes if you fall into that bracket, without forcing a cumbersome administration for a spouse if it's not needed, then please come and see us at Stone Law, and we would be happy to help.